Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down the big stories. And today, wow, we are diving into a geopolitical shockwave that kicked off with a proposal that honestly sounds like something out of a movie. Former President Trump wanted to buy Greenland. Yeah, you heard that right. And while it might sound kind of funny, the fallout was absolutely no joke. And this, right here, this is the quote that lit the fuse. This wasn't just some, off-the-cuff remark. According to the former Danish Prime Minister, Mr. Rasmussen, this was the message, delivered in no uncertain terms, before a planned meeting was set to happen. It just immediately set the stage for a massive diplomatic showdown that had the entire Western alliance holding its breath.
All right, so how on earth did we get to this point? I mean, the idea of the U.S. buying Greenland, it's not totally brand new. It was actually talked about way back after World War II. But for a sitting president to bring it back up, and so publicly, in the 21st century, that was just completely out of left field. And it basically forced everyone to draw a line in the sand.
And this slide, man, it just lays out the clash of perspectives perfectly. You see, on the American side, it was framed as this big, strategic real estate deal, a totally logical move to lock down a vital asset. But for Denmark, and for Greenland itself, it was just absurd. It was a deep personal insult. I mean, you can't just put a price tag on your people and your homeland. It was like the two sides were living in completely different reality.
Okay, so this begs the big question, right? Why Greenland? Why all this sudden, intense focus on what many people think of as just a giant island of ice? Well, it all comes down to geography, military power, and the one thing that's changing everything, the climate.
Look, Greenland has always been strategically important, but its value right now, it's just skyrocketing. Think about it. As all that Arctic ice melts, new shipping routes are opening up. The whole region is becoming this new frontier for competition between the world's biggest powers. And Greenland, it's sitting right smack in the middle of all the action.
And this image, this really reframes the whole situation, doesn't it? We're not talking about some remote, empty wilderness anymore. What you're looking at is an absolutely critical square on the global chessboard. It's a place where the US, Russia, and even China are all starting to bump up against each other.
So let's break this down. The US already has a huge presence there with the Thule Air Base. It's absolutely vital for things like early warning radar for missiles and for space surveillance. But here's the kicker. With Russia beefing up its military in the Arctic and China calling itself a near-Arctic state, controlling Greenland is seen as the key to stopping these rivals from setting up shop in, well, what America considers its own backyard.
But was this really about just buying a piece of land? Let's dig into the strategy here, because according to analysts like Tom Wright, this whole blunt offer to buy Greenland, well, it might have been just one move in a much bigger, much sneakier game. And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Was the White House actually expecting Denmark to say, sure, how much? Or was the shock of the offer the real point? The analysis suggests it was a super calculated move, with three very clear goals in mind.
This 3Ds theory is pretty fascinating. So first you have deflate. The goal was to kind of puncture the ego of European allies, make them feel less important on the world stage. Second, deter, to send a loud and clear message that the US is willing to go it alone to protect its interests, alliance or no alliance. And finally, distract, the classic political playbook, right? Shift the news cycle away from problems at home. So the offer wasn't really a real estate deal. It was a weapon of power politics.
So, faced with what they saw as a direct threat to the stability of their entire continent, you can bet European leaders scrambled to respond. This wasn't something they could just, laugh off and ignore. They knew the response had to be serious and it had to be united.
You could practically hear the alarm bells ringing all across Europe. Germany and Sweden, in particular, they moved fast to signal their own interest in Greenland. They wanted to make it crystal clear that this wasn't just Denmark's problem, this was a European problem.
And their response was way more than just some angry press releases. We're talking concrete action. Britain and Germany started pushing for a high-level working group on security. They even floated the idea of a NATO-led naval mission to keep an eye on the Arctic. One expert from an American think tank even said Europe should put all measures on the table, which is basically code for, we are ready for a serious fight over this.
And wow, this quote right here, it just cuts right to the bone. You have a top German politician saying flat out that a move on Greenland would destroy NATO. I mean, just let that sink in. That tells you everything you need to know about the stakes here. This wasn't seen as some minor spat. It was viewed as an existential threat to the most powerful military alliance in modern history.
So, what's the long-term fallout from all this? Even if the sale was never really on the table, the simple act of making the offer created these deep cracks and sowed a ton of distrust among some of America's closest allies.
And that uncertainty, it was just corrosive. European leaders were totally left guessing. Was this whole public spectacle just a hardball negotiating tactic? A way to squeeze Denmark for other deals, maybe on security or access to Greenland's huge mineral deposits? The fact that nobody knew for sure was, in itself, incredibly destabilizing.
The source material actually calls this whole episode a grave threat to European hope. That is some seriously powerful language. And it really speaks to the damage done to the core idea of a stable, predictable partnership across the Atlantic, the very bedrock that has supported Western security for more than 70 years.
And that really leaves us with the big, lingering question, doesn't it? Was this whole Greenland thing just a bizarre, one-time diplomatic meltdown? Or, as the Arctic ice keeps melting and the region becomes more and more valuable, was this actually a preview of what's to come? The opening shot in a new great game for control of the Arctic. And that is why this strange story is so incredibly important to understand.